Hello everyone, welcome to Zoroaster's class. This is Nirupam and I hope you're having a nice time. And today I'll be discussing about the cost concepts, about some other cost concepts that are associated with the firm or the producer. So we all know that the producer faces different types of costs in the short run as well as the long run. So in the short run he faces the fixed cost as well as the variable cost of production. Again, the fixed cost comprises of the sunk cost as well as the avoidable cost. In the long run, all the costs are variable, and hence such there is no distinction between the short run between the fixed cost as well as the variable cost. Now, depending on the cost structure in the long run as well as short run, the producer will decide to operate if and only if he is able to cover his costs of production of significance or consideration, which is the variable cost in the short run, when the fixed cost or sunk cost or the variable cost plus the avoidance cost, if the fixed cost comprises of also the avoidance cost component in the short run, and the total cost in the long run. Now, when we are talking about the cost, there is also a related concept which is associated with this cost, with the factors of production, which is the opportunity cost. So the opportunity cost is nothing but the cost which you are incurring for employing a given factor in a particular activity rather than the alternate activities where it could have been employed. So the highest benefit which you could have obtained by employing that unit of output, unit of input in some alternate activity is the opportunity cost which you are incurring when you are employing that unit of input in a given activity. So that means, let's say today I am working as a teacher. So as a teacher I am earning x1 units of money. But if I would have decided, given my skill sets, I would have decided to work in an office, then I would have been paid something like x2. So here x2 is the opportunity cost of not working in that office but working as a teacher. Now, if x2 is less than or equal to, if x2 is less than or equal to x1, that it makes more sense for me to work as a teacher, because my opportunity cost of working as a teacher is low compared to the alternatives available. However, if x2 is greater than x1, then the opportunity cost of working as a teacher is more compared to the alternatives which I have with me, and hence it would make sense for me to change my track of profession. Now, the similar consideration is also applicable in case of the factors of production. So let's say why this opportunity cost comes into play. This opportunity cost comes into play because here the producer who is managing the machinery and employing the labor as well as the raw materials to produce units of output is also an employee, in the sense that he is putting all his effort, his time to manage the production process. But he could have decided otherwise to work in some places rather than manage this production process. Then his opportunity cost is nothing but the maximum benefit which he could have derived by employing himself in an alternative profession rather than managing the production process. So when we talk about the opportunity cost in this sense, that means the producer is also imputing a cost to himself in the form of wages or salaries which he should receive for his managerial activity, as well as apart from the profit which you should, normal profit which you should be earning for his entrepreneurial spirit or the entrepreneurial effort which he has made. So the producer also keep this factor in the mind even in the short run, where he can easily employ himself some alternate activities, whether apart from the variable cost he is also able to recover his opportunity cost of managing the production process while deciding to operate either in the short run or in the long run. So we need to keep this thing in mind, that the cost of production necessarily does not mean just the cost associated with the capital or the labor as well as the units of the raw materials that are being used in the production process, but also the efforts of the producer that goes in managing and production process to produce that output. So this is how the opportunity cost comes into play. Now, another concept that is associated, which again has to do with the cost structure, is the economies of scale which we can achieve in the manufacturing process. So what is this economies of scale? Economies of scale is nothing but if we keep on expanding or contracting the depending on the situation, if you keep on expanding or contracting the production process, then you can keep on continuously reducing your total cost of production or the average cost of production. So there can be three situations which we can have in a production process. So when you're, let's say you're employing two factors of production, x1, x2, to produce q units of output. Now you decide to multiply both these factors of production by a factor k, where k is greater than 1. So now rather than using k units of output, now you are using kx1 and kx2 units of output. Now if your output is increasing, now let's say your output now changes from q to k1q. Okay, so now there are three possibilities depending on the relationship between k1 and k. Now if k1 is greater than k, then you are having a production process that exhibits increasing returns to scale. That means increasing the factor of production by a certain factor k will lead to an increase in output that will be more than the factor k. That means if I'm doubling my output, if I'm doubling my input, my output will more than double, and so forth and so on. However, if k1 is equal to k, then the production process is representing something which is known as the constant returns to scale. That means if I double my input, I will double my output, and so on. There is a third situation where if k1 is less than k, but k1 is certainly greater than 1. Obviously, nobody will be increasing the factors of production that leads to the reduction in the output being produced. So hence k1 always has to be greater than or equal to 1. Okay. Now if k1 is less than k, that means if I am doubling my output, if I am doubling my input, my output gets less than double, then I am representing a situation which exhibits decreasing returns to scale. Now depending on these three returns to scale in the production process, I can have three different economies of scale. So when I am increasing, when k1 is greater than k, then I am representing something which is known as economies of scale. That means more I increase my factors of production, my output increases even more, proportionally speaking. Whereas when k1 is less than k, that means in decreasing returns to scale, I am having these economies of scale. Now these economies of scale is something where, let's say if I'm doubling my inputs, my output gets less than double. So relatively my average cost, if I see technically, is rising more. So technically my average cost is actually is increasing more, relatively speaking, compared to the the revenue which I am earning. Okay, so my total cost is, not the average cost, but my total cost is increasing relatively more than the total revenue which I am earning. Now keeping these things, so now how do we determine, when given the cost structures which we have, that is average cost, average variable cost, average fixed cost, as well as the marginal cost of production, how do we determine whether a particular production process or the particular plant is exhibiting this situation? So for this we actually use parameter S, which is nothing but the ratio of the average cost as well as the marginal cost, so corresponding to a given level of output. Okay. Now, when this S is greater than 1, that means my average cost is increasing more than my marginal cost of production. Hence, in that situation, what is happening? So technically, what is happening is this: I am exhibiting something, the economies of scale. Okay, so I am actually operating at that point where K1 is greater than K. Now, if S is equal to 1, that means average cost per unit of output is equal to the marginal cost. Then I am having something which is where K1 is equal to K, or I am exhibiting constant returns to scale. So S greater than 1 represents something where I am having increasing returns to scale, because here the marginal cost is falling, whereas average cost is rising. Fine. Now, when S is less than 1, that means my marginal cost at the kth unit of output is greater than the average cost corresponding to the kth unit of output. I am representing something which is known as the economies of scale. That means where K1 is greater than K, or where it is exhibiting decreasing returns to scale. Fine. Now, there is also a related concept which is associated with it, which is known as the MES, or the minimum efficient scale. So when this MES is applicable, so if we remember the structure of the average cost curve, I mean the short run average cost curve, it is basically U-shaped. That means it reaches the lowest point corresponding to a given level of output Q star before it starts rising again. Now, there are certain industries or plants or production processes whereby rather than having a U-shaped average cost curve or short-run average cost curve, we have something where it is L-shaped. That means where the short-run average cost curve is the lowest possible, represents the situation where it is giving me the lowest cost possible to produce not just a given level of output but a given range of output, starting from the point where it becomes flat and horizontal and parallel, almost parallel to the x-axis. Okay, so this is the range of output over which the SSA gives me the lowest cost possible to produce anything. Now, MES is nothing but the smallest level of output that corresponds to the short-run average cost curve, which is again representative of the fixed factors of production that gives the lowest possible cost to produce. So it is the smallest possible level of output at which the cost of production is lowest given this short-run average cost curve, and the output at which it is, and the smallest output at which it becomes lowest to produce the given level of output is something known as the MES, or the minimum efficient scale of output. So minimum efficient scale of output is something which is only applicable in case the short run average cost curve something represents a shape like this, or an L-shaped structure, somewhat approximating an L-shaped structure. Then we'll have a situation where we'll be talking about the smallest possible level of output as well as the cost of production is lowest, and that is at the minimum efficient scale. Okay. Now, all these concepts which we have talked about corresponds to a situation where we are having a single product plant. But when we are talking about a multi-product plant, then the concepts need certain modifications in order to represent the realities of a multi-production structure. So in multi-production structure, apart from the economies of scale, we'll also be talking something which is known as the economies of scope. So what is happening in case of an economies, or in case of analysis of cost structures of a multi-product firm, is this, that rather than considering dividing the total cost in a single product plan by dividing that by the corresponding level of output, in case of a multi-product plant, let's say where we are considering two different products are produced, that is Q1 of product 1 and Q2 of product 2, we'll assume that they are produced in a certain proportion, lambda 1 and lambda 2. Okay, fine. So when we are considering, so they're they're manufactured in proportion, that is lambda 1 and lambda 2, such that Q1 is equal to lambda 1 Q and Q2 is equal to lambda 2 Q, where Q is used as a scale of output measure. Okay, so it is used as a scale of output measure. Then average cost, then the average cost concept which we can use related to multi-product firm is something known as the Ray average cost. What is the Ray average cost? Because it will change in the proportion of lambda 1 and lambda 2. So when we are talking about a Ray average cost, that is RSC Q1 Q2, so we will be writing this, but nothing as the cost of producing lambda 1 Q, lambda 2 Q, units of output divided by the scale of unit of measure. Okay, fine. So here, so this is the Ray average cost concept which we are using, where we are talking that they are produced in a proportion lambda 1 and lambda 2 subject to scale of output measure Q, such that Q1 is equal to lambda 1 Q, Q2 is equal to lambda 2 Q. Then the Ray average cost of producing these two outputs will be given by the cost of producing these two outputs together, that is lambda 1 Q and lambda 2 Q, divided by the scale of output measure, which is Q. Now, depending whether the ratio of the Ray average cost, again we can use a similar concept of that we have used in case of a short run that we have used in case of a single product firm, that is equal to AC by MC. We can also use a similar concept in case of this Ray average cost, that is RSCQ. Using in place of the average cost, we can use the Ray average cost, and we can check and making suitable modifications in the denominator, that is in the MC. We can see whether this S, in case of a multi-product firm, is exhibiting increasing returns to scale or economies of scale, or constant returns to scale, or decreasing returns to scale, or diseconomies of scale. That means in that case we can write this expression as follows, whereby let's say when we are dividing, when we are differentiating this with respect to Q, that means we are differentiating Q is equal to C of lambda 1 Q, C of lambda 2 Q, so first we'll be dividing the differentiation in the numerator, that is 1 by Q lambda 1. Then we have del C by del Q. So del C by del Q1, okay, plus lambda 2 del C by del Q2 minus 1 by Q squared C of Q, okay. So we can write this as Q squared lambda 1 Q del C del Q1 plus lambda 2 Q del C del Q2 minus 1 del Q square C of Q. So we can write this as 1 by Q square Q1 del C by del Q1 plus Q2 del C of del Q2 minus C of Q. Now when my reaverage cost is rising, so I can have two situations, that is DRSC dq, it can be greater than 0, it can be equal to 0, or it can be less than 0. So let's see when it is greater than 0. That means 1 by Q square, that is Q1 del C del Q1 plus Q2 del C del Q2 is minus 1 by Q squared CQ is greater than 0, which means CQ is less than that means CQ is less than 1 by Q1 del C1, sorry, Q1 del C1 del Q1 plus Q2 del C2 del Q2. That means CQ by Q1 del C1 del Q1 plus Q2 del C2 plus del Q2 is less than 1. Okay. Now this denominator component is nothing but the summation of the marginal cost. That means what is the marginal cost of producing Q1 units of output? What is, so this is del C1 by del Q1, del C del Q1 is nothing but the marginal cost of producing Q1 units of output product 1 when the production of product 2 is kept constant, whereas del C by del Q2 is the marginal cost of producing Q2 units of product 2 when the production of product 1 is kept constant. Okay, so this is Q1 by del C. Q1 is nothing but we can say now that, yeah, so this is the numerator. So now we can see that if total cost, so this is the CQ is nothing but the cost of producing both these units of both these products, that is product 1 and product 2. Now if CQ, that is the total cost, CQ is less than 1, that means here if you are considering this concept, let's say the economies of scale, that means my average cost. So here what I say that my average cost is rising. So average cost is rising as I'm increasing my output, which means that C of Q is the ratio is less than 1, and when it will be when the the average cost is not increasing, it is constant, then it will be equal to 1, and in case the average cost is falling, then it will be greater than 1. Now this ratio which we are finding, that is C of Q by Q1 C del C1 plus del Q1 plus Q2 del C by del Q2, is nothing but the S. That means the parameter which we use is similar to the single product case to determine whether the production process exhibiting constant increasing or decreasing returns to scale. So we can see now that when this is greater than 1, we know that when this S, parameter S, is greater than 1, that means numerator is greater than the denominator, then the production process exhibits increasing returns to scale. When it is equal to 1, it represents decreasing returns to scale, and when it is less than 1, it represents the constant returns to scale. When it is equal to 1, and when it is less than 1, it then represents decreasing returns to scale or economies of scale. Now if we see the logic here, that when my production process is such that when I'm increasing my unit, when I'm increasing my per unit production, my average cost is falling. So it is then representing a situation where this ratio is greater than 1, and hence S is also greater than 1. So in just like the single product case, this multi-product case in this situation represents economies of scale. Why it is economies of scale? Because we can see from the differentiation here that here the average cost is falling continuously as we keep on increasing the output in the multi-product form. Whereas when this ratio is less than 1, that means when my average cost is increasing as I keep on increasing the output, that means it is rising, then my S will be less than 1, and hence then just similar to the single product case, it will then be representing this economy of scale, whereby when the average cost remains constant, even if we keep on increasing the output. That means both output and input, the cost of production and the revenue that we are generating consequently is increasing at the same rate, and hence my average cost remains unchanged. Then it will represent a situation where this ratio is equal to 1. That means S at that point will be equal to 1. So in that situation, I will be having constant returns to scale. So now you can see that how we use the economies of scale concept when we are considering a multi-product firm. Now apart from this economies of scale concept, there is one more concept which is the economies of scope. So what is this economies of scope? Economies of scope is something, let's say, which is again given by a parameter E. Let's say it measures the following ratio. That means what is the cost of producing these two outputs separately, that is out product 1 and product 2, C of Q1, Q2. What is the difference between the total cost of producing these two outputs in separate plants and the cost of producing these two outputs together, that is product 1 and product 2 in the same plant, divided by the cost of producing these two outputs together in the same plant. Now if this ratio is greater than 0, that means there exist economies of scope. That means you can benefit more by producing these two products together rather than producing them separately. But however, if this ratio is less than 0, that means if the ratio is negative, that means there does not exist any economies of scope. So economies of scope in that situation does not exist. So depending on this ratio, we can take a call whether we should be producing these two outputs or these two different outputs or any other different outputs together or in separate plants. So thank you for listening to this lecture on the multi-product firm, as well as the discussion on the economies of scale and economies of scope for the multi-product firm and the economies of scale for the single product firm. Hope you have enjoyed the lecture and thank you once again.